Hey Panthers, here's the video for proportional relationships. And just to recap, today we talked about proportions. And proportions are two equal ratios. And one thing that we noticed today with equivalent ratios and proportions that there ends up being a lot of patterns involved. And when we talk about proportional relationships, we are really talking about repeated patterns. So we're going to go through this lesson. I'll be very honest with you, there's going to be a lot of new terms in this lesson. So do the best that you can at understanding the vocabulary, but understand that the main gist of this lesson is understanding that there is a repeated pattern going on, and we're going to analyze those patterns. So just remember that proportional means that relationships in which the ratios or rates are constant, or yesterday we talked about proportional meaning rates or ratios that are equal. You might want to add this to your notes. Again, we use a lot of big words in here, but basically we say constant, we're meaning equal ratios, equivalent ratios. Non-proportional, obviously just the opposite, are relationships in which ratios or rates are not constant, or ratios that are not, remember that slash to the equal sign, are not equal. And the last one, big term here, constant of proportionality. Now think about the word constant and what that means to you. Constant of proportionality states that proportional relationships can also be described using equations of the form y equals k times x, where k is the constant ratio, which is also called the constant of proportionality. Very confusing, a lot of big words here. Basically what it's saying is that when you have equivalent ratios, or you have a proportion, the proportion can also be described in a relationship in an equation using the form of y equals k times x. Now y and x should be pretty familiar with, but k is something new. K is actually going to be the simplified rate or the simplified ratio. K is going to be the repeated pattern that we see. So bear with me. I want you to make note of this formula here, y equals k times x. And I also want to show you that if we were solving for k and x means that next together means they're being multiplied. If we're solving for k, we would divide both sides by x. So another way to write this formula is k equals y divided by x, and we will be using both. So again, you may be very confused, and this is very confusing unless you see it. So again, all my goal is here for you today is to get your notes copied down, show you a couple sample problems. Don't freak out if you don't understand it. Really, it's not a big deal. Once you see it tomorrow, it'll make more sense. So let's just get the notes, go through the notes. Here is example 1. Says determine whether the set of numbers in the pattern forms a proportion. So we have a table here, something, we just saw these yesterday. We have time and distance, and what I want you to do is put your time as your x values and distance as your y values. Okay. Another thing that you may be able to think about prior knowledge. Do you remember input and output tables? Maybe from 6th grade, 5th grade. These are very similar. But instead of input, we're going to use x values, and instead of output, we're going to use y values. And what I want you to do is remember to find the k value, which we'll do in a little bit. Let me backtrack here. This particular example just wants you to determine whether there is a proportion here. In other words, if you treat these like ratios, are they equivalent? Okay? And what I want you to do in order to solve this, I want you to find y over x, because if you remember from the notes we just wrote, y over x will give you a k value, which is something we're going to be using for the next couple of days. So I want you to take each y value, in this case this one's going to be 24, and divide it by the x value, in this case, which is 1. This would be 48 over 2, 72 divided by 3, and 96 divided by 4. Well, 24 divided by 1 is 24, 48 divided by 2 is 24, 72 divided by 3 is 24, and 96 divided by 4 is also 24. So again, going to the whole idea, is there a pattern here? And the answer is yes. And because there is a constant pattern, we would say that this is proportional. And that is the answer for this one. For B, again, I'm going to denote the x and y values. And in order to compare these, I want you to do y divided by x. So here the y value is 2 over 1, which is 2. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. Now right away, these two do not match. Not the same. And therefore, without even going any further, we know that this is not proportional. Remember, proportional means that they are equivalent to each other, and these clearly are not. I don't even have to test all of them. If two of them are not the same, there's not a clear pattern or a constant pattern that we notice. Example 2. Now we're looking at some stories here. Nina charges $5 for each day of pet sitting. Let's pull this out. $5 each day. Write an equation relating the cost of pet sitting to the number of days, and what would the cost of pet sitting for 4 days be? Okay, so let's first start. Write an equation relating the cost of pet sitting to the number of days. Well, the cost, we know, is $5 for 1 day. Okay, so the equation then, again, let's think about what we are solving here for. Let's use some variables. I'm going to use C for cost, okay, and the other thing here that we're looking at is D for days. Okay, so in other words, to find the total cost, again, this only tells me the cost for 1 day. To find the total cost, you would take the $5 per day and multiply it by the number of days, or do 5 times D, which would give you the total cost. So this is the equation that I'm looking for. Again, looking at the information, it cost us $5 for each day, so 5 times D will give me the total cost, which I used as C. So this is an equation. And this is a constant value. It doesn't matter how many days the dog is cared for. The rate applies for any number of days. And B, again, last part of this, I'm sorry. What would the cost of pet sitting be for 4 days? So take your equation again, and instead of D, you're going to plug in 4. And 5 times 4 would be a total of $20. For B, the cost for 2.5 pounds of ground beef is $7.20. Write an equation relating the cost to the number of pounds of ground beef. Okay, So keeping in mind, let's pull out the information we know, or start with what we want to solve for. I'm going to use C for our total cost here. I'm going to use P for the number of pounds. So again, we don't know the total cost, and pounds is something that is somewhat of a variable. So we go through and take a look at the information we're provided. Cost on top, we know it costs $7.20 for 2.5 pounds. So if you do the math, we'll find the rate for 1 pound. So $7.20 divided by 2.5, you're going to get $2.88 per 1 pound. So given this information, if we know the cost per 1 pound, to find the total cost, or C, we would do C equals the price per pound, which is $2.88, and we'd multiply it by the number of pounds that we want to purchase. How much is 4 pounds of ground beef? Well, the cost for 4 pounds would be $2.88 times 4, which is $11.52. So a little bit of overlap review here from what we've seen. But the biggest thing here is to remember that constant of proportionality is stating that a proportion exists to equivalent ratios and that there's patterns. Lots of patterns involved. So again, the goal today is just get your notes copied down. I may have confused you more than anything, but at least we'll come into class tomorrow morning with an idea of what we're talking about. We'll do some more examples, and I guarantee you feel much more confident about this material. So have a good night, Panthers.